So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the special meeting of the members of Pace Savings and Credit Union Limited. I'm Vladimir Shatirian. I'm a partner with Blake, Castles & Graydon, which is the law firm that acts for Pace Credit Union. I will be acting as secretary for this evening's meeting, which will be opened by the chair, Mr. Mark White, the Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, or as it is known, FSRA. On behalf of the administrator, FSRA, and the credit union's interim management, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all members and thank you for making the time to attend this important meeting. I would like to recognize the following individuals who have joined me at the head table. Mark White, the Chief Executive Officer of FSRA. Michael Henry, an executive search partner with Odgers Berndtson Financial Services Practice, and Rubina Havlin, interim chief executive officer of PACE. I would now turn the floor over to Mark White. As the administrator of PACE, exercising the powers of the board of directors of PACE, Mr. White will chair tonight's meeting. Mark?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the PACE members' special meeting. It's now 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. The notice of tonight's meeting was posted in each office of the credit union, was also published in a local newspaper in accordance with the credit union's bylaws. Our registration staff have reported that at the commencement of the meeting that there was well over the minimum number of members to meet quorum requirement. In fact, there's about 180 members here tonight, so thank you all for coming. I therefore declare this special meeting of the credit union duly constituted for the transaction of business. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and the video will be posted on the credit union's website so that members who are unable to attend the meeting can watch it online. As chair, I've appointed Vladimir, who introduced me tonight, the representative from Blake's and his corporate counsel to PACE, to act as the secretary at tonight's meeting. And Keely Overcott, a law clerk with Blake's, will also be working with Vladimir and take notes to prepare minutes. When you registered for the meeting this evening, you should have received a member kit, which includes a copy of the meeting notice, the agenda for tonight's meeting, ballots in case we require written ballots for resolutions, and some other materials, including some of the presentations you'll hear. Only members participating in tonight's meeting in person may vote at this meeting. Tonight's special meeting of members has been called by a resolution of me as CEO of FSRA in my role as administrator of the credit union. As you know, PACE Credit Union is currently under administration. Under Ontario credit union legislation, FSRA as administrator exercises powers of the directors of the credit union. Currently, there's a vacancy in the director positions. While FSRA as administrator has the power to appoint a new board for PACE and has the responsibility to satisfy itself that the new board is well positioned to manage PACE for success, we value the input from you, the members of PACE, tonight, and that is why we've called this special meeting to get your input. The PACE members in attendance will be asked to vote on a special resolution to amend the credit union's bylaws and to vote on a slate of directors proposed by FSRA. I'll explain shortly why we're proposing the amendments to the bylaws, and you'll hear from Michael how we arrived at the proposed slate of directors. A notice of the resolution by FSRA calling for this meeting was posted on the credit union's website. Tonight's meeting will begin with an update from myself as the CEO of FSRA on the administration and the process to return the credit union to member-controlled governance through the FSRA proposed slate of directors. Next, Rubina Havlin, the interim CEO of PACE, will provide a brief financial update for the credit union for the 2019 fiscal year. The purpose of this update is to provide a summary of the information which FSRA is relying on to support the transition from administration back to member-controlled governance. The credit union's financial statements will not be made available tonight as they're currently under audit from the accounting firm of PwC. The audited annual financial statements will be made available at the credit union's next annual meeting, consistent with past practice. Mr. Henry, Michael, to my left, a partner with the leading executive search firm of Odgers Berndtson, will then speak regarding the board recruitment process. This involved a careful identification of the skill sets necessary to provide effective governance for the credit union, and he'll also cover how the individuals were identified and vetted for your consideration. Mr. Henry will introduce two of the four-member FSRA search committee who were able to join us this evening by asking them to stand. He'll also identify the 9 candidates who, on the advice of Odgers, are being recommended for election by the FSRA search committee. I'll also ask George Cook, who we're nominating for the PACE board chair, to stand and introduce himself after Michael's presentation. George will give you a sense of the strong leadership that I know he can provide to PACE. We will have a question and answer period after we hear from today's presenters and before we move to voting. The Q&A period will be to address any questions related to the presentations. There will be a separate opportunity for discussion on each of the matters put to vote. So I'd ask you to please hold your questions until the appropriate time. The member question period should start around 8 p.m., and I'd ask our presenters, including myself, to all please be mindful of that time so that we have sufficient time for questions. After the member question period, we will then proceed to vote on a special resolution to amend the PACE bylaws. The proposed amendments are first to change the number of directors from the current 12 to between 7 and 11, with the precise number to be determined by the board chair. And secondly, to remove the current requirement that a candidate for director has to be a member of the credit union or a predecessor credit union for at least 1 year. The specific amendments to the bylaw number 1 are in your package, I believe. Thank you. Section 4.01A of the bylaw would be repealed in its entirety and replaced with the number of directors shall consist between 7 and 11 directors as determined by the chair of the board from time to time. And paragraph 4.02A of the bylaw would be amended by deleting the words at least 1 year. These governance changes are critical so that the board leading PACE out of administration will have the necessary skills and experience to provide effective governance and oversight so that FSRA and the members can be confident that when we release PACE from administration, it will be well governed for its members. After PACE bylaw number 1 is amended, the number of directors can be set to the appropriate circumstances rather than requiring always 12 directors. After the bylaw is amended, FSRA, acting as the board under administration, will make a decision as to the number of directors, and we propose to make it 9 directors for the new board, including the chair. FSRA will recommend to the members a slate of nominees as recommended by our selection panel based on Odgers' input. These nominees, if elected, will form the new PACE board. They'll take office and have powers at the time FSRA removes PACE from administration. However, before the members vote on the nominees, we'll ask the members here tonight whether there are additional nominations, and if there are no additional nominations, whether you require an adjournment to next Monday, February 3rd, in accordance with the notice of meetings, to have more time to consider the nominees. As Odgers has led a carefully structured and merit-based professional process that included any PACE members that wish to be considered for directorship, it's FSRA's hope that the members will respect that process and not feel the need to nominate additional persons for directorships. If there are additional nominations, I will propose to adjourn the meeting to next Monday so that FSRA can determine whether it will change the slate of directors or whether it will proceed with the existing slate of directors. If after the adjournment we determine it's not appropriate to change the nominees, the vote next Monday will be on FSRA's recommended slate. If we do change the slate of nominees based on nominations from the floor, we'll propose a new slate of directors. If there are no additional nominations, you will then be asked whether we should put FSRA's recommended slate of directors to a vote tonight, or whether the meeting should be adjourned to next Monday. In either case, you will be asked to vote on the proposed board of directors based on the FSRA slate. And you are completely free to vote for or against the FSRA recommended slate. Please bear in mind that we are proposing this slate because we want to see PACE on the road back to member-controlled governance and out of administration. A vote against the slate will mean that PACE will remain in administration until FSRA is then comfortable that there are proposed directors that will provide the necessary governance so that we can have PACE exit administration. As the notice of the meeting states, in the event that all the items in tonight's agenda cannot be effectively addressed within the time allotted, or that an adjournment is required to consider new nomination, or for the members to more fully consider FSRA's proposed slate, we will adjourn to next Monday, February 3rd at 7 p.m. I remind the members that the credit union's bylaws permit this meeting to consider only business or matters that were stated in the notice. These matters are set out in the agenda, which you should find in your package. As a first order of business, may I have a motion from the floor to approve tonight's agenda? Thank you. May I have your name? And may I have a seconder? May I have your name, please? Thank you, gentlemen. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. The motion's carried. I'll now turn to providing an update on the administration process and what is required to return the credit union to member-controlled governance through the FSRA proposed slate of directors. So tonight we're talking about the proposed changes to the bylaw and the new slate of directors, which we hope will be acceptable to PACE members. I acknowledge that this special meeting process has been different than what has been done for other PACE meetings, and I know that that has caused some consternation with some members. As administrator, it is a different process. As administrator, FSRA does have broad powers to act. We could have simply decided to put directors in place, but we decided that it was more important to have the consultation with the members. So essentially, we need to be in agreement with the members that this is the right group of directors to bring this organization forward. We're holding this meeting because we value your input tonight. We want to be here to share information with you. We want to have an opportunity to hear your questions and to answer them. I know the timelines have been short, but I am pleased to report that we kept to what we said we would do in November in our letter to the members and in our teletown hall. Tonight I'm going to recap some of the background of what we've done, and that's the timelines. I'll talk about how we got here and what we look to do going forward. I'll also talk about what it means to be in administration and what the next step on the process is to returning PACE to full member control, called supervision. You'll hear from Rubina about PACE and that it continues to be financially strong. You can have confidence that your deposits are safe in PACE and that they're insured by the Deposit Insurance Reserve Fund. PACE continues to be a viable organization. That's one of the important things we look for before we will be willing to return it from administration to member-controlled governance. I'll also provide you with some regulatory background on the procedures of administration and supervision and what it means to go to member-controlled governance. Here's a timeline. It's a brief history. In September 2018, after beginning normal course examinations in 2017, aided by whistleblowers, DICO, Deposit Insurance Corporation, the predecessor, one of the predecessors of FSRA, found that the issues of governance were so severe that it intervened and took control of PACE. June 2019, FSRA amalgamated with DICO, and later that month, the PACE AGM was held, presenting the 2018 financial results. In the fall, November, we sent a letter to members. Most of you should have, well, you all should have received it. And we then had a teletown hall where we spent an hour and a half answering the members' questions. I realized, and that's part of the process, that the members were thirsting for the information about what was going on within their organization and about how they would get control of it. I also realized, oh, Tyler's helping me out here. Thank you. I also realized that there was a desire to understand how they get control of their organization again. This meeting is the first step on that process. It's a part of the legal formalities. If we have to adjourn, between tonight and February 3rd, we hope to complete it. We'll then undergo a transition with the board where FSRA, the PACE management, will work with the board before we exit administration so that they're informed and can be ready to govern. We'll then, in the supervision process, FSRA will continue to be there to support the board. We'll be at directors' meetings and we'll work with them. We're then hoping that by this end of the winter, the board will be fully functional, and then at the AGM, it'll be a much more normal annual general meeting than it was last year. Tyler, if you could, the next slide, thank you. So this slide summarizes some of the administration and supervision provisions that are in the Act. There's some more details in the appendix. In short, under administration, to protect members, depositors, and other stakeholders, and frankly also to protect the credit union system, FSRA can act as the board and can either control or even act as management. So unfortunately, the regulator then is doing double duty. It's both a regulator and it's making sure that the organization has proper governance and oversight. Under supervision, PACE's board, the new board we'll propose tonight, they'll be responsible for the governance, for the oversight of management. Although, as I said, FSRA will continue to be in the room to support them and to make sure that we're in agreement on key decisions. The transition from administration to supervision and then on to more normal course regulation out of supervision does have only limited precedence. This is an unusual situation where the issues at PACE were governance related and they were not financial, and we as the regulator are comfortable that PACE is a good organization to return to member-controlled governance. So there aren't a lot of precedents for this, so we are making up a process that we think works under the legal regime and works to represent the member interests. Currently, FSRA does have the powers of the directors, and our goal, though, is to return PACE to you. We can then make sure that we have an appropriate division where we act as a regulator and we have checks and balances, having a strong board in place. The new board is this key requirement to remove PACE from administration. FSRA, of course, has to have confidence, because we're acting on behalf of the members and the other stakeholders, that the board will be able to provide the governance and the leadership to deal with the problems that caused the issues at PACE that brought about administration. We have to have confidence that the board will be able to select and supervise management, provide strategic direction, oversee risk management, and good processes and controls within PACE. It's FSRA's responsibility under the law, under our credit union system, to make sure that this happens. It is a tough process for this new board to undergo to take over governance of this organization, but after meeting them, after speaking with the search committee, talking to auditors, I'm comfortable that this board is the right board for PACE. This is just a short quote from the November 22nd letter. We've already basically executed on these things, what we said we've done. It's been a very tight time frame. We went from having called for candidates at the start of December, closing that off at the end of December. Michael had to do interviews and screening with his team, and then we went through the panel selection process. That's one of the reasons why that we were unable to get you the information earlier than today on the proposed set of directors. I apologize for that, but the timing was tight. There was no other way we could get this done and still meet today's meeting and present a slate to you. As you'll hear from auditors, the proposed board represents a strong, experienced group with governance, technical expertise, and a good mix of PACE, credit union sector, and other financial services experience. FSRA and the PACE members both need confidence that these are the right people to lead PACE out of administration. And as you will hear, I and others at FSRA have that confidence. We hope that you will share it as well. In order to return the credit union back to its members, FSRA and auditors have worked to have this slate for your review. It has been a challenge, but we're ready to go. The results are, and I hope you will agree, worth waiting for, as we have an excellent slate of directors to propose. The notice of meeting, which you've received, basically contemplated that we would have the meeting today. It described the bylaw changes, although you only saw the text today, they were completely described in the notice. And that we will have the opportunity to adjourn if we require more time. The purpose of the special meeting and working with auditors was to get a board of directors that would be smaller, more expert, and flexible. 12 directors was considered to be too many as we went through the process. We wanted it to be a manageable number, but we wanted to make sure we had the right expertise on it. As FSRA is currently the chair of the board, we'll determine the appropriate size, and we're looking to make that 9. The chair can then later amend the size of the board in the future, and of course the PACE members would be able to amend the bylaw if they prefer a fixed number of directors going forward. The important rationale for the change in member eligibility is to ensure that we have the best people available to be on the PACE board. Wrapping up now, this slide summarizes the steps. Getting the board of directors in place, making sure that they're there then to select a management team and to confirm the senior staff at PACE, transitioning out of administration by having an agreed transition plan between FSRA as the administrator and the new board, working hand in hand with management, then going out of administration and into supervision, where, as I said, the board will have the FSRA support and the support of management, and then, hopefully in the not too distant future, exiting supervision and going to the monitoring process. So those are the ends of my remarks about the process to return to member-controlled governance. And I will actually now ask Rubina Havlin to provide a financial update.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you to this special members meeting. It is a pleasure to see so many of our members here tonight. 2019 was a year filled with change. As we collectively navigate, I thought it would be helpful to remind ourselves of PACE's desired outcome, which is to be returned to a member-controlled governance structure. Henry Ford captures this sentiment in his quote, "The secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." Throughout 2019, my focus was to work closely with the regulator to address governance issues, which led to PACE being placed under administration. Establishing good governance delivers valuable services to our membership and builds a culture of trust. Charged with building the new, my team created a clear strategic direction by outlining a 3-year business plan containing measurable goals that help us manage our day-to-day operations while collectively working towards a common direction. This strategic plan identifies 5 objectives that will guide PACE's ability to stabilize, sustain, and scale up over the next 3 years. Let's take a minute to go through them briefly. Enhanced governance. As shared with you during our AGM in June 2018, PACE has elevated our governance controls to the 3 lines of defense. This model establishes management control, provides various risk control and compliance oversight functions, and ensures independent assurance. Together, these form the pillars of an effective governance system. Complementing this management, implemented a comprehensive enterprise risk management program, instilled a risk culture, including articulating a risk appetite statement, and appointed new external auditors, PwC, and internal auditors, BDO. Our efforts were invested into centralizing operations through a new back office structure which helps with cost containment, improving process efficiency, and deploying virtual desktop technology. Our ability to continue to provide our members with consistent, reliable service is dependent on improved product performance and working towards an efficiency ratio that is in line with our industry's top performers. Increased competencies. Focus was on stabilizing key management functions, improving branch network performance, and enhancing people development plans by providing training, monthly targets, and wellness support programs. Member growth and retention. PACE designed an omni-channel strategy to provide an integrated and seamless multi-channel day-to-day banking experience. Execution of this strategy is planned for 2020 and 2021. We will continue to listen to you. We'll develop financial solutions tailored to your needs. I am proud of the opened communications line with members and have appreciated hearing your ideas and suggestions. Our Member Matters sessions have hosted over 300 participants, and it's been my pleasure getting to know some of you. Accountability culture. This means we will be accountable to you, our members, each other, to our shared values, and that all decisions will be evidence-based. This is demonstrated by finalizing a 3-year internal audit to regular review business areas and address audit findings. Complementing this, my team anchored a performance management program for PACE staff that aligns with the goals outlined in our 3-year strategic plan. An integral element of accountability is the safeguarding of members' funds. In an effort to be transparent, I will share high-level financial performance results for the credit union in 2019. It is important for members to understand that the financial information shared this evening, as Mark had mentioned earlier, is subject to change as the final audited financial results may be materially different from this presentation. Both of PACE's subsidiaries are expected to report their 2019 numbers by the middle of February. These numbers will be consolidated along with PACE Credit Union results to produce the audited financial performance that will be shared with you at our AGM in April 2020. PACE has maintained total assets under management of $1.1 billion and stabilized the membership base over 2019. We are expected to earn a noticeably smaller profit this year. 2019 operating income is $3.7 million compared to $8.5 in 2018. Despite this challenged conditions, I am proud that PACE has continued to invest in our communities while at a lower level than 2018. As part of the instilling of good governance, the credit union's lending policy and parameters were tightened to address historical risk issues. This resulted in our loan portfolio contracting by $100 million compared to 2018 figures. PACE currently has a lending book of $760 million. PACE shows adequate liquidity and capital ratios, which are measurements of the integrity of the financial institution. The risk-adjusted capital ratio exceeded regulatory limits, which has enhanced quarter over quarter throughout 2019 as a result of de-risking the loan portfolio to better align with PACE's new risk appetite. As we look forward to 2020, management anticipates that the credit union will scale and build upon the 2019 stabilization efforts, operational improvements, and governance systems implemented. Lending portfolio runoffs is expected to continue, but will be offset by the new loan origination in 2020 as the overall credit quality of the lending portfolio improves. Together with our talented team, engaged membership, we will collaborate to stabilize, sustain, and scale to ensure that PACE continues to meet your banking needs. Thank you for your continued trust.
Thank you, Rabina. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions later. I will just comment that those are some of the financial numbers, those capital ratios, the liquidity position that give us confidence as administrator that PACE is well positioned to return to member-controlled governance. So thank you for that description, Rabina. I'd now like to turn it over to Odgers.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rabina. And thank you to FISRA and certainly the membership for placing your trust in us. As Mark mentioned, I'm a partner within Odgers Bernson's Financial Services and Board practice, and thought I would lay out just a bit of an agenda. First, who I am. I'm a partner again in the financial services practice, and I've served with the firm for about 7 years. During that time, I've led over 150 executive search mandates and 60 plus chair and or board director appointments. Turning to the agenda, we'd like to frame up of who we are, the selection, outreach, and timeline, selection criteria, so our review of this, define our selection process, and lay out the board remuneration framework. And finally going through the recommended candidates, which are in your packages, so 8 directors and a chair with a total of 9. As most of you know, the selection outreach and timeline, starting with November 22nd, this was the announcement of the selection process communicated by Mark White, the right of me CEO of FISRA, in all members' mailing. December 6th, the posting of the opportunity on Audra's website is also posted on LinkedIn and posted on the Institute for Corporate Directors website. At the same time, this was posted on in the Globe and Mail. Finally, December 20th, that marked the date of the closing for the recruitment. Andres Bernstein, as some of you may know, we are a global search firm, but have strong Canadian roots, including offices across the country in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. Both myself and my partner to the left, we are based out of our corporate headquarters in Toronto. Bringing to bear for this particular mandate a few pieces. One, our financial services practice, which I'm a part of, including Amanda Bogata to my left. Within the financial services practice, we've led over 150 searches within the FS practice across Canada. We do have dedicated partners who specialize in asset management, capital markets, banking, insurance, fintech, private equity, real estate investment, and wealth management. Our global practice, although this has really been a focus in Canada and even more focused in the Ontario marketplace, we do leverage that asset as well. We have 40 plus sector experts across the board within FS. The other piece would be the board practice. Again, I'm a member of our board practice. We do have a dedicated practice with a proven track record of chair and director appointments for some of the country's most prominent public and private sector organizations. Some of our recent work includes the Canada Infrastructure Bank. That was a net new board of directors with 12 directors and a chair. I co-led that mandate. Some others, RioCan, Valiant Pharmaceuticals, the Capital Markets Regulatory Authority, and the Trans Mountain Corporation, and there are others as well. So our firm's extensive experience with board appointments has provided our team with a broad range of national context to leverage as candidates or sources. This was of particular import for this mandate. Again, personally having led about 60 chair appointments and director appointments. Over to our process, which is the third pillar which we've leveraged. We always place an emphasis on diversity and inclusiveness. There are a number of exemplifications of this. The recent board searches our team members have led for federal organizations, all placing an emphasis on diversity and inclusiveness. This includes CBC Radio Canada, the Canada Infrastructure Bank, all positions, and placed a huge emphasis on those particular mandates. I'll pass it on to Amanda.
Right here, you see the ad, the complete text that was placed for the Board of Directors search. Moving on, I'm going to speak to the selection criteria, the ideal candidate profile that was sought. Based upon the need to have a strong board that would enable the credit union to be placed out of administration, clear criteria for the ideal candidate was selected. Governance experience, experience in at least one of the following: credit unions, banking or other deposit-taking, investment, lending, asset management or ancillary financial services business. Experience in at least one of the following: business leadership, finance, accounting, retail or commercial lending or investments, financial services regulation, government relations, development, and execution of business strategies, risk management, large technical transformation, and change management. And background in at least one of the following: strategic planning, risk management, human resources and compensation, financial products, finance, and legal, a strong educational background, and willing and able to devote the time and energy needed to fully participate in an inaugural board with an important fiduciary responsibility. The selection criteria was then looked at from a skills matrix perspective. Core skills that were identified in general, speaking Two examples of general skills that were sought was experience in corporate organizational governance and ethics, and financial knowledge and literacy as two examples. Credit union and financial services, that would be expertise in credit union operations. Another example, hands-on experience and expertise in the financial services sector with insight into operations, strategy, strategic planning, and market factors.
So we assessed each candidate against the following skills matrix. You should also know that this was moderated by in-person interviews. On the left-hand side, just running through these and I'll further unpack them. Finance and audit, risk management, legal, regulatory, human resources and talent management, information technology and digital, and client relations, service delivery. Just to further unpack that, starting with finance and audit, experience and expertise in accounting and audit, including development of or oversight responsibility for internal controls in financial services and the investment industry. Risk management, experience and expertise in investment, financial, strategic, and operational risk management at the enterprise-wide level. Legal, regulatory, so this means experience and expertise in corporate law and or compliance with regulatory regimes within financial services. Human resources, talent management, experience in human resource management with particular emphasis on executive compensation and change and transformation. The IT and digital experience with IT, technology-enabled business transformation, digital transformation, systems management, and cybersecurity. And client relations and service delivery, applicable experience in client relations and service delivery in the financial services sector. This was complemented by further considerations, the location, so representation of the different regions in which Pace Credit Union operates, diversity, and as I'd indicated in one of our prime pillars, representation of employment equity groups. So this includes Aboriginal peoples, racialized persons with disabilities. So bringing to bear all of that through our search process. Gender, you'll see that we have 5 directors who are female and 4 male directors, one including the chair. So we're quite happy with that outcome. And finally, membership. A member of Pace Credit Union, and we worked very hard and think we have 2 very strong member directors who will be serving. As Mr. White had indicated, we struck an advisory panel, so all of the work that we had done was done in very close collaboration with the advisory panel. So the panel itself comprised of 2 FISRA board directors and 2 FISRA executives. At the board level, Brent Zordrager is a member of the FISRA board of directors. He was previously CEO of Kindred Credit Union. Under his leadership, Kindred grew to become the 10th largest credit union in Ontario, with assets of more than $1 billion and membership of more than 22,000, so comparable to the Pace size, scope, and scale. He was joined by Blair Kelper-Smith. Blair is a member of the FISRA Board of Directors. He brings an extensive amount of experience in the areas of mergers and acquisitions, governance and stakeholder issues. He has served as an advisor to many boards of directors on business transition, transformation, and governance. Blair is in the audience today. I won't ask you to stand, but he is with us. Kelly Kimmins, the Chief Human Resources Officer for FISRA. Kelly has an extensive expertise and experience in both public and not-for-profit sectors in employee and labor relations, learning and organizational development, compensation and benefits, employee engagement, health, safety, and wellness. Finally, Shivdeep Panache, Senior Manager of Examinations for the Credit Union and Prudential Supervision at FISRA. Through the initial stages of administration, Shivdeep worked alongside many PACE staff members and got to know them very well. Shivdeep has a strong academic background, and all of these individuals played a significant part in the search process.
The The selection process. The ideal candidate profile and competency matrix were used as the guides for determination of candidates under serious consideration by the advisory committee that Michael just spoke about. 157 individuals applied to the role by the application deadline. Of this group, 11 individuals specifically declared they were a member of PACE Credit Union. Odgers also conducted research, networking, and candidate identification. In total, over 200 individuals were considered for a role as chair and/or director. Odgers conducted 24 in-depth interviews for candidates in consideration for the director or chair position. Of these 24 individuals, 5 were PACE members. 18 candidates were interviewed by the advisory committee, including 3 PACE members, given the relative competencies that they brought to the table. Speaking to board remuneration and the framework, FSRA and Odgers Berenstain undertook a review of compensation through benchmarking of the Canadian credit union market. Odgers recommended and FSRA has approved the following board remuneration framework. Annual director retainer of $15,000, annual committee chair $5,000 in addition to director retainer, annual chair retainer $10,000 in addition to director retainer, and meeting attendance premium $500 for less than 4 hours and $1,000 for more than 4 hours. Speaking now about the recommended board chair and directors nominees, George Cook is the nominee for chair. He is the chair of OMERS Administration Corporation, the former CEO of the Dominion of Canada General Insurance Company. Key competencies related to the matrix that we discussed earlier of particular strength are corporate governance, executive management, financial literacy, financial services sector experience, finance and audit functional experience, and legal and regulatory. Karen Hacker, the former Senior Vice President, Human Resource and Volunteers for Toronto 2015 Pan American and Para-Pan American Games. I'm sorry, I didn't give her full title. Former Senior Vice President, Human Resources and Volunteers, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary. The particular strengths she brings to the table: corporate governance, executive management, legal, regulatory, and human resources. Cliff Jenkins, a PACE Credit Union member, former client executive IBM, former city councillor, City of Toronto, brings corporate governance, financial literacy, credit union experience, client relations, and service delivery. Ross Lamont, a board chair of Trillium Mutual Insurance, former board director of Meridian Credit Union, brings corporate governance, financial literacy, credit union experience, client relations, and service delivery.
And just to continue, Marissa Lauder, former Chief Financial Officer of Street Capital Bank. Marissa brings executive management, financial literacy, financial services sector experience, finance and audit, and risk management. Allison Mendez, who, as you'll see, is asterisked, is a current PACE Credit Union member, has served as a board director for the Toronto Parking Authority, former managing director and senior portfolio manager for Manulife Asset Management. Allison brings financial literacy, financial services sector experience, finance and audit, and risk management. Marianne Mooney, former chief member experience in brand integrity for Kindred Credit Union. Marianne brings executive management, credit union operations, financial services sector experience, client relations, and service delivery. Shelley Ray, founder, board director of OLG and founder of People Are Us. Shelley brings corporate governance, executive management, financial services sector expertise, and human resources. Finally, Philippe Sarfati, Philippe is the EVP, Chief Risk Officer, Concentra Bank. Philippe brings executive management, financial literacy, credit union expertise, financial services sector experience, risk management, legal, and regulatory. I'd ask now for the selected directors just to stand. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So in closing, our dedicated board practice includes specialists who have spent years building deep relationship with skilled candidates, both nationally and globally, a number of which you'll see in front of you. We understand the nuances and challenges of maximizing board effectiveness while ensuring cultural fit and commitment, and have supported many businesses in the selection of board members, considering their existing talent and corporate objectives. In undertaking the process of candidate development, assessment, and interviewing of candidates under the guidance of the advisory committee, Audrey Bernstein's overall assessment is this is a skilled, diverse, and experienced board. These individuals in aggregate comprise a board with capabilities and attributes to both understand PACE and provide strong leadership and governance, including selecting and overseeing management. They are engaged and willing to commit to the responsibilities that serving on the board of PACE Credit Union requires.
Michael, Amanda, thank you very much. George, would you like to say a couple of words?
Mark, thank you very much. Mark has actually asked me to identify for you what my interest in undertaking this particular role is. And as I explained to the interview panel, I have several interests, but perhaps the item that motivates me the most, I was part of the three-person panel that actually led to the creation of FSRA. I've spent my career, I'm in my mid-60s, I've spent my working career either in industries that are regulated in executive roles or alternatively at regulators that were regulating those various industries, whether it was in financial services or energy. And since retiring at age 60, I've spent my career in governance roles, again, largely across those particular sectors. I have a real interest in seeing that the architecture work that underlies the regulator is actually able to work in a very productive way for the some 40,000 or so credit members of the credit union here at PACE. That's what caught my attention when I was approached about this position. So it goes without saying that I'm interested in the well-being of all the members of the credit union, but the background as to why, in large measure, is conditioned by that particular work experience and a strong belief that with a board like this, and I've had an opportunity to have some input with Audrey and with FSRA as the board is being selected, I actually believe that we can do the job that we're being asked to do. So I hope you will ultimately agree at the end of this process that we are able to do it. And I say thank you to you in advance for the opportunity to you.
Well, hopefully you got a sense from George's remarks of his commitment to public service. There are, at the back, I believe, of the Audrey's presentation, there's actually biographies, more detailed biographies, if you want to peruse them to see really what a strong, qualified, experienced group that we've been able to assemble. I believe it is the right group to bring this organization forward. I'd like to thank Audrey for their very hard work in a very short period of time, and the selection committee, particularly my two directors who provided great governance and credit union insight into the process, as well as the two professionals from FSRA, the executives who also participated in that. And I'd like to thank all the nominees for being here, for making time on short notice, and frankly, for their commitment to this. It is an aspect of public service, and I hope the rewards for you will be well beyond the financial ones, because there is great enjoyment in knowing that you've done a good job, and this is a great opportunity to do that. I'd now like to move us to our question period. And we have allotted about 30 minutes for the question period. The questions will be, if you could focus them on the presentations you've heard. They are to position us then so that we can then have a discussion on the amendments to the bylaws and to the voting on directors, so there'll be an opportunity for discussion on those items when they come up. I'd ask you to please keep your questions aligned with the presentations and the business of the meeting. And if I could ask you to also take one question at a time so that everybody can have a chance to ask their questions.
My name is John Roach.
Thank you, John.
I've been a member of this credit union since 1971 through the Etobicoke Teachers Credit Union. And I want to express some concerns. I want to go back a little bit. I don't want to ever see a CEO or a CFO blood related. I don't want to see that on a board of directors blood related. And I don't want to see that in the administration blood related. Nepotism. Can I pose a second question?
As I see nobody else standing at the microphone, yes, you may.
Can I pose a question to one of the directors?
I'm sorry, to one of the nominees?
Yes, that's correct. A nominee, not a director yet.
Yes. Why don't you ask your question, and as long as I feel it's appropriate, because obviously they have not yet been briefed on PACE by us, so I may have to help them with the nature of the question.
All right. Have all the directors been very well vetted? I obviously see there's been quite a thorough job done on that. Are any of these directors direct or indirect association to PACE that could be a conflict? Could any director be a competitor to PACE?
Thank you.
And I'd like to pose that to a particular individual nominee.
Okay. So perhaps I could answer that question since we've actually done the vetting.
Very well, Mark.
Sorry, you finished though, Mr. Roach? I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I finished that point. I just want to address to a certain director.
So with the assistance of auditors, we've actually done reference checks and conflict of interest checks. We made sure that during the interview process that was part of the discussions we had, both in the panels and through the auditor's briefing and in follow-up questions. And we have actually required disclosures from directors of conflicts of interest. And so at the current time, I'm pleased to say that we're satisfied that all of the proposed nominees are free of conflicts of interest. Those who are PACE members, their relationships are appropriate from PACE, and we're not concerned that they have any relationship to some of the issues that are currently, for example, under litigation or led to the administration. I'm also comfortable saying that the other directors have been fulsome in their disclosures of conflicts of interest, and there are no conflicts of interest that we believe preclude any of the directors from holding office. I will point out that one of the directors does have a business relationship, well, he is an officer actually of an important credit union, well, I should say community bank, Concentra. He has disclosed that conflict to us, and there are small transactions occasionally done between PACE and Concentra. That director, we will have to manage those conflicts, and I've spoken with George Cook, the proposed chair, about how that would be done. I've also spoken with that candidate, and we are comfortable that those conflicts can be dealt with through recusal and through creating walls. So at this point, I'm quite comfortable that I can answer your question and say that we have well vetted the directors. Conflicts have been identified, and they're all manageable, and that the nominees can proceed.
That is the person that I was directing my question to, and I just hope everything is squeaky clean, because if it isn't, I'm gone. Thank you very much.
Mr. Roach, I share your concern. It's very important, and as the regulator, we will also be watching governance, and I also know that this group of directors are keenly interested in making sure that they are well governed. Please.
Good evening. Excuse me. My name is Donna Neal. I'm a member of the Stroud branch. On your agenda, it says introduction of the proposed chair of the board. My question is FSRA appointing the chair? My understanding is that's the first thing that the board does as a whole is elects the executive chair included.
Don, are you a lawyer?
No.
You're a very good lawyer. You should be a lawyer.
Thank you.
And I'm a lawyer by training, so I say that. I think it's a compliment. I'm not sure everyone always agrees with that. But I did mean it to be a compliment. So this is an unusual situation where it's a hybrid process, as I would call it. FSRA, as I mentioned earlier, because of the administration process, we actually have the legal right to not consult with members, to just decide who the board would be and to decide who the chair would be. So we have decided, though, that we actually want to consult with members. We want to make sure that the members and FSRA are aligned and that these are the right directors, including that we have the right chair of the board. I feel quite strongly that George Cook should be the chair of this board. You're right, under the bylaw, I suppose there is a risk that the directors could all get together and then vote George out. But from the FSRA point of view, when we actually are willing to release from administration, we want to know the board are people that we can trust and that it has a chair that we're going to trust. So we are essentially going to use our powers as administrator to, yes, recommend this slate, including the chair of the board.
Okay, thank you. And you said we're going to have a discussion about the bylaw amendments?
Yes, we will.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dan Lebrecq. Just a question of clarification. What is the intended term of the initial board?
Thank you, Mr. Breck. Great question. The intended term is 3 years. I believe that that is the prescribed term under the bylaws. Lad, do you want to comment on that?
I think that's right. I think it would be appropriate for the FSRA as the administrator of the credit union to propose a particular term for the directors, and if the 3 years is the term that's being proposed, that could be put to vote.
My thinking of that is that, you know, you could perhaps have 2, but I really think 3 years is probably the right time frame, and so I'd be open to someone saying that maybe it could have been 2. We had some discussions ourselves. I do think after that, then the important thing is that there is an opportunity to start to have some staggering of directors,
okay.
Because in an ideal world, so, you know, but that could be something that could be proposed at members where with certain terms would be extended of directors to maybe give some people 4 years to make sure that not everybody's coming off at 3 years, or you don't have to wait for all.
That was the
at
point
once.
of my question. I didn't want 3 years from now we're back to square one.
You are a very good corporate governance person.
I was actually the board chair about 20 years ago, so, but I don't have the qualifications these people do.
Well, you ask very good questions. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Antonio Ciccarelli. On the board remuneration framework, I see that the meeting attendance and premium for less than 4 hours is $500. But if it's more than 4 hours, it will jump to $1,000. Since you indicated at the beginning of the meeting that you try to have some restraint on the economical part, so maybe we can get a little bit more as a member. What is the meeting that normally goes on? And if you have an indication when it goes over, and if it goes over for an hour, I think $500 more, it's quite a substantial amount. Maybe you should establish an amount per hours, which is $125 if you go through the math of the $500 for the 4 hours. But I think if you put a $500 more, I'm not sure that it goes well with the members. Is there going to be enough an hour more? Is it going to be 15 minutes more? We're going to have a bathroom break? So what is it? I think we should indicate more what we're looking for, and we should be clear on what. Naturally, you do a job, you have to be compensated. Let's put this way very clear. But when you leave this leeway, there may be a possibility of some wrongdoing. And I'm not suggesting that, but there can be. And in an organization, or sometimes there may be a wrongdoing.
Well, thank you for your question. I'll make a couple of comments. Michael, maybe I'll turn it over to you. I will say that this type of structure is actually not unusual. The truth is, and I see this with my own directors, and there is actually, the directors of FISRA are paid in the same range, and they also have this idea of half days and per diem. So it's not an unusual structure. We stole it because it is used in the public service. And the key concept behind it is directors will usually spend the same to 2 to 3 times amount preparing for the meetings because of the volume and complexity of the materials that they will have. So when you see a half day, they prepared minimum a half day, probably a full day for that meeting or a series of meetings. And then when it goes over past that, so it's a 6-hour meeting instead of a 3-hour meeting, they would have spent, again, 2-3 times that amount of time in preparing. And so that's the theory behind this. I will also say that understanding the background of all these individuals, this is not the thing that they should be doing if they're interested in making money. They all make more money in other parts of their lives doing other things. And so I actually don't think we've created any moral hazard here. I am keenly aware of that. If you offer too lucrative a position, then you get people who are doing it just because they think it's an easy paycheck. I am comfortable that this is not an easy paycheck. This is going to be tough work, and we're lucky to have these dedicated people to do it for what I think is a reasonable amount of consideration, and we did do some benchmarking. And so, Michael, why don't I pass that over to you for your experience?
Yeah, no, so I think, Mark covered most of the pieces here. I would just say that this information came up through a series of benchmarking. So this is, to your very good question, something that's been vetted. I think at the outset of this board's role, probably the first 6 to 8 months, there's a lot of work to be done. And so acknowledging that, but appreciating that everybody is certainly professional and exercise really good corporate governance. So, I just echo Mark's points, but to your point, and I think to give you further confidence that this has been researched and benchmarked against similarly sized credit unions across the country.
Can I just have a second? I'm not suggesting that there's going to be any wrongdoing. What I'm suggesting is that the terminology should be clearer. Now that the gentleman indicated there is a work that was done at 3 hours, 4 hours, so that's okay. But when you go jumping from a certain amount to another, without having the knowledge of what we're talking about here, that's what my concern was.
And sorry, I couldn't quite hear it as well, but I think your concern is just that it basically has a cliff effect to it, as we used to call it in quant work, where all of a sudden it jumps from one thing to another instead of a gradual transition. So I think that is a comment that I would, if this board is successfully elected, I'm sure this is something that usually the board does have the opportunity to review its own compensation. I'm sure that they would be pleased to consider this.
May I supplement? I just wanted to supplement the response that I provided with respect to the term for the directors. I had a chance to look at the bylaws specifically, and the bylaws do provide that candidates for directors are to be nominated for a fixed 3-year term unless certain circumstances apply, which are not applicable for the purposes of this meeting.
Thank you, Vlad. Next question.
My name is Al Matthias. Sticking with the board of directors, my comment is reading their bio. It looks like you really have a good slate of directors there. My question was, I did not understand the question of re-election. After the 3-year term, would they be subject to re-election?
Yeah, my understanding is that they would not be term limited after 1 term.
So they could,
That's right.
but
Yes.
they would be re-elected.
That is correct, and I would hope, as a regulator, I would hope that is the case. I'd like to see continuity in the board as well as changeover. I think both those are important things.
Okay. So before I leave the matter of the board, my advice to them is please do not rubber stamp what one of your senior members may do, please investigate things for yourself before you make a decision, because at the next AGM, we shall take you to task.
I'm not sure that was a question, but I understand the sentiment, and I think the board, proposed board understands it as well.
The other question was, we talked about internal auditors. And my question is, if the internal auditors probably will submit their report to management, if they are not satisfied with the action that is being taken by management, will they be allowed to submit that report to the external auditors of PACE?
Thank you for the question. The internal auditor's report typically goes to the audit committee of the board. Tobias, right? I just want to make sure I'm... So the internal auditor's report goes to the audit committee of the board.
Right.
The audit committee of the board reviews the management recommendations and the auditor's recommendations and makes that decision. So there is a line of defense, and the audit chair will designate what the actions will be. It will not be management.
Okay.
Does that help you?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't get hidden and shoved under the carpet, that's my point.
No.
That it comes out to the general public here. My last question was, we talked about subsidiaries. You said we have two subsidiaries. I guess one is PACE Securities. Is the other one CCC or CCE?
Yes, it is. It's Continental Currency Exchange is the second subsidiary. And
Well,
the
you're
first
still
is
with
PACE.
us?
They are.
Good Lord. Okay. And the final question is, I think, Robina, you mentioned something about the income being 8.5 million in 2018 and 3.5 in 2019. Is that correct? Now, do we get the answers at the AGM, or do you want to shed some light here today?
I'll shed some light. I think there are three primary reasons for that. One is interest expense. We bought deposits in 2018 at a very high cost. I think the second is some of the pay downs of our commercial loans that have had impact on our interest income. And the third is some small expenses that haven't been incurred. Those are the three reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Hi there, it's Charlene Gonzalez. And I just wanted to confirm, you had mentioned a couple of times in regards to the number of board of directors that the board chair decides the number, and that you were hoping that members do not wish to add any additional members. So you've asked us to vote on the range between 7 and 11. My question is why did you come to bring 9 to be nominated for board of directors? And in the event that it is felt the chair would require additional board members, because I think Mr. Henry mentioned in the next 6 to 8 months there would be a considerable amount of work to be done, then would they be brought for election at the annual meeting in April? Is that enough time, or would we get an intern report or something to indicate how that board is doing?
It will be the board's decision, chair's decision of whether they would like to bring on some additional directors and go up to 11. So that is possible, and it is something that the chair, in consultation with his board, could decide to do for the annual general meeting. Don't preclude that. Your question of why 9 within 7 to 11? So part of it was finding the right balance. A smaller board can be actually more nimble where they're having to learn, but when you looked at the competency matrix and the desire for skills and experience, we were actually searching for a really broad range of experience. And so you look at the different backgrounds that we were able to find for the 9, and we think we found 9 really good directors with some overlap on some very key things like credit union expertise and governance, but they all tend to bring something, or sometimes more than one thing, that's very unique and special. So it could have been 7 that we were proposing. It would probably be unlikely to be an even number, since generally that's not the best for board functioning, but it can work. And so really it was a function of getting the right size board with the right expertise, but it is because of who we could find. That's how we ended up at 9.
All right, thank you.
Edna Jeffermans. I have a question. I know that the main concern is for us to return to members' governance, and I was just a little disappointed in the recommended board chair and directors selections that so few are presently PACE members themselves. And so when you say you want to return it to members, why were there not more? I know you're looking for youth. You've chosen what you feel are the best people, but I think there could have been a little more effort to have looked within that. You said some people who were PACE members were in the short list. Why there isn't more in there in our members' governance movement?
I'll turn this question to Michael just after making a couple of very brief comments. First of all, they are all now PACE members, but they have not been long-term PACE members. Only 2 of them have been at the start of the selection process. I'd point out that 3 others have very significant other credit union expertise, and they may not know PACE, but they know of PACE, they know credit unions, they understand the sense of community and how credit unions function. So it was important, though, that we made sure that we had all those other skills, experiences, and competencies, and it was more important to make sure that we're going to have the people to manage all the different issues that we foresee for PACE than it was to make sure that we filled it only with PACE members. I do understand that that is not the tradition of most credit unions and not the tradition of PACE, but I think you look at where PACE is right now with its issues and the need for professionalism, for technical skills and expertise, and frankly, a little bit of independent view from people who aren't in the credit union movement right now, as well as people who are in the credit union movement but not in PACE. I think that will be a good mix and be a healthy mix for the PACE community. Let me pass it over to you, Michael.
So very, very good question. And just to reiterate, I mean, 157 applications, of which 11 self-declared as PACE credit union members. 3 of those individuals, of course, were interviewed by the search committee. All 11 individuals were certainly reached out to by us, but I think to Mark's point, we want to ensure that you have the best stewards on this board and best-in-class corporate governance. So while we have 2 very strong corporate directors in your current PACE member directors here, we are not comfortable in putting forward any additionals. Now, the newly constituted board will also be able to assess individuals that do express an interest, and I think we have a benefit here for having more than 9 directors, and so that could change, and I think we're going to leave that up to the incoming board to decide that moving forward.
Sorry, it's me again. You've brought forth a great slate of directors for us to consider. You talked about the time commitment in the preliminary 8-10 months. My concern is, I'm not sure, have you listed in this recommended list all the other boards that these people may be serving on currently? If they're serving on other boards, do they have the time to genuinely give PACE the attention it deserves?
So I'll take that one as well. I mean, traditionally in any board search, it's a very good question. What we would look to is an individual who's not on any more than 3+ boards, because simply they just can't dedicate the time required. This again, I mean, all directors here have put their names forward with the view that this is going to be a lot of time. And they've all really thought that through, and I'll be honest, there's a number of prospective directors that withdrew by virtue of the time commitment. So everybody here in front of you does have the time to commit for the board.
Is it possible to find out what other boards these directors, proposed directors, serve on?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
can we get that information tonight before it's put to the membership?
Absolutely. So that was, again, part of our process, and so all their biographical details, which are shared towards the end of the document, do list their corporate membership. But if there's any questions following this discussion, happy to address those.
So all the titles that are on here, there's nothing else that hasn't been shared?
And you're referring to the appendix?
I'm referring to the recommended board and chair and directors list.
Keep flipping. Keep flipping.
Past the blue. I didn't go past the blue page. Sorry, I didn't go past the blue page.
Nope, that's okay.
Sorry, I just have one more comment, then I'll sit down. In the teleconference, a member did mention, brought forth an idea of term limits, and I think, Mark, is it? You said that you would take that under advisement, so I don't know if maybe this is something the board should be considering given what's happened.
Yeah, so that actually is a matter, we're looking right now, FSRA inherited bylaw number 5 on prudent management, and basically that is something we're looking at generally for the credit union sector, making sure, to the other great question about making sure there's good rotation of board members and making sure that board members are not on there for too long so there is fresh blood. So that is something we're doing generally for the industry.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question and a follow-up question. I'm not sure if it was stated before, but when this board comes into being, does FSRA immediately release the credit union from administration, or is there a certain time period?
Great question. So, and I may have not been clear in my presentation, so the election of the board does not give them the powers of the board until FSRA makes an order removing the administration, and it would then go to supervision, which is then that hybrid process I talked where the board has the powers, but FSRA continues to be there for support and basically in more of an active dialogue than we normally would be as a regulator.
So at the inception of the board, you go from administration to supervision?
That's correct. And that word supervision is confusing to some people because we are a supervisor. We're always supervising credit unions, but it's a specific type of supervision where FSRA is in the room for all board decisions, where we do have the ability basically to, we have to co-sign major decisions.
Okay, and this may be simplifying it a bit, but would you be able to list what are your performance criteria for this new board when they go into supervision to say, okay, fine, you can go, or we bring you back to administration?
We will have a discussion with the new board. We will agree on those as basically a transition plan for, first of all, when we will go out of administration into supervision, when we think they're ready, what do they think they need to be ready, and then also, we will also then be developing a plan for what do we need to do to release them from supervision and go back to more of a routine regulation and monitoring.
But is it a list you can share with us? You know, you need to have this, that.
That's unfair. I would be prejudging and imposing on the board, which I'm hoping will have an active dialogue with me at this point. I'm not going to tell them what I think they have to do right now. Guy Hubert, who's here tonight, Guy and I probably do have some very good ideas what we'd like to see, but I don't think it's appropriate to discuss in this forum until I've had that discussion with the board.
So we may hear about it later on?
Your board, I hope, will share that with you.
Okay.
Hello, Sandra Weir. I've been a member since, I think, '93. You've done a great job of presenting 9 candidates, and I was looking at the skills matrix and experience, and I didn't find anybody that said information technology and digital, and so given that you want to do a lot of revamping of the system and sort of attract more members, I was wondering if there is some people with cybersecurity, et cetera, on the board.
Without pointing out the incoming chair of the board, George currently chairs OMERS, and the use of technology and IT, both at the governance table and down through the organization, is of primary concern. Is there any IT executives? No, but from a corporate governance perspective, a number of the individuals have participated on IT committees of boards, but it's a very good question.
Okay, maybe if you could adjust the skills matrix to show the people.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Renata Tadabades. I just want to know if it'd be possible, Mark, you had stated that FSRA has, in essence, appointed George Cook as the chair. Is it possible to know whom else you considered for the position?
No, I don't think that would be appropriate. But I would say that yes, George did have to compete for that position as well.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Rosemary Acciatoni. My question is, what will the mandate of the board be? Is that something that will be decided when they're banded together? What is their key objective?
So that's actually a very broad question. But I referred to our bylaw number 5, and that's actually on our website, and that does actually talk about what the role of the boards is. And in the Credit Unions Case Populaire Act, there's a description of the legal duties of it. So if you want the detail, you can go there. But it is to provide governance and oversight over management, making sure that they understand the strategic decisions, making sure that the processes and the controls in place in the organization are there and providing effective challenge. So basically they are responsible for managing the organization from a governance and oversight perspective. Not from doing, but making sure management is doing and doing it appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
So I think this should be our last question. I think we're a little bit over time, aren't we, Vlad? They're such good questions, though. Thank you.
I have a question about the time spent between the election of our board of directors to the complete stepping back of the FSRA. Is it flexible? Is it going to be set in stone? How is that going to work?
It's a very good question. It will be flexible. It's responsive, actually, to the other question where people were asking me, do I have objectives for the board to get out of administration into supervision? That is something that we will agree a plan. I don't think it's useful to actually pre-decide that we're going to get, I would like to get out of administration this winter, so in the next couple of months, we'll say, so before your annual general meeting. The plan to get out of supervision, I think, is more dependent on what we find as the board is actually experiencing their role and how quickly they feel that they're ready to basically not have us in the room in that more active engagement. So I think that should rightly be a flexible timeline.
If I may, a bit of a subsidiary, what's the anticipation in terms of number of meetings in 2020 for the board of directors?
I think that's a question that the new board, and they also have to map out their governance framework. So I know George has some ideas. I haven't had a chance to discuss with the rest of them, but they have to decide their committee framework. So, in addition to an audit committee, there might be a governance and nominating committee, there might be a risk committee, there might be a talent and human resources committee. So as you basically have to figure out your committee structure, in my experience, along with the board meetings. So I think that is a TBD, something that we as a regulator were keenly interested in, but we really want to hear that from the new board.
But I imagine there'd be lots between now and at the AGM.
Will there be meetings between now and then? Yes, I would certainly expect so.
Thanks.
All right, I see two people standing at the microphone, so two quick questions.
Okay, Norbert Werder. I'm a member since the 60s. I just want to mention that the food was excellent, and as a pastry chef, I must say, fantastic. And one more thing, sir, and enlighten me when I'm wrong. If you have an audience like this, and you introduce the head table, shouldn't the head table, when named, please stand up? Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, Vlad, if we didn't stand up, and that I think we just waved, so our apologies. We were too informal. Last question.
Pauline DeLeon, you talk about good governance being very important to you, but you've already acknowledged a director has a conflict of interest. I find that contradictory. Can you elaborate, please?
Sure. Having a conflict of interest is actually, if you're going to have talented people that have other engagements, you're going to have conflicts of interest. So I spent 7 years at the Bank of Montreal. I met regularly with their board, managed the risk management committee there, and most of our directors, frankly, had conflicts with the bank because they were key representatives of the industry in Canada, or they were professional service providers to those people. Managing conflicts of interest is what's important. The fact that there may be a conflict of interest, and we're talking about a business conflict of interest just here, we're not talking about a legal conflict of interest. If we perceive that there was a legal conflict of interest in the sense that person was prohibited, that they would just have a misalignment of interest, we would have precluded them from the nomination process. Business conflicts of interest, because businesses deal with each other, are a fact of life, and they have to be managed. I have confidence that George and the board will manage those conflicts.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We went a little bit longer, but they were very good questions, and I learned from them, so thank you. So we're now going to move to the first official voting part of our agenda, which is the bylaw amendments. Do we have a copy of the resolution which we can put on the screen? I'll begin speaking anyway. The resolution proposes 2 amendments to the bylaw. The first, as I outlined earlier, is to amend to change the number of directors from the current 12 to between 7 and 11, and to have the chair of the board determine that specific number within that range. The second proposed amendment is to remove the requirement for a nominee to be a member of the credit union for at least 1 year in order to be eligible to serve. The blue and green papers actually have a table, I believe, with a set of side-by-side changes showing the exact changes I'm talking about. So you can see the black line of the proposed changes in the table. The purpose of these changes, I mentioned earlier, is to ensure that PACE will have a board of the right size to function well, with the flexibility to change it, that's the size, as circumstances require. It's also so we can have the best possible mix of skills and experience to help PACE to be successful in its business and operations. Please note that if the bylaw amendments, which we're proposing, are not passed, then we won't proceed to voting on electing directors. As such, the vote on the bylaw is effectively a vote for a decision of whether we're on the path to returning PACE to member-controlled governance. Of course, if the bylaw is not passed and not amended, we will still continue to work at FSRA to find another path back to member-controlled governance, but we do urge you to consider the path that we have recommended today. The resolution requires a favorable vote from at least 2/3 of the members present in order for it to pass. Under the credit union's bylaw, we will first vote on the resolution by a show of hands. If it's not clear to the chair that the resolution is carried or rejected, we'll proceed to a ballot vote. May I have a motion from the floor to approve the special resolution to amend the bylaw? Thank you. Your name, please. Thank you, Mr. Lebrec. And may I have a second? Thank you. There is a clear, decisive, more than 2/3 majority. Thank you. So I'll now move to the second bylaw amendment to 4.02. Vlad, would you like to read that?
For sure. So this resolution is to amend section 4.2, paragraph A of bylaw number 1. It is proposed that that section of the bylaw be amended by deleting the words "for at least 1 year" from paragraph A of section 4.02.
Thank you. Let's do the first and the second, see if there's any discussion before we put it to a full vote. May I have a person to move the amendment to bylaw section 4.02? Thank you, Mr. Lee. May I have a seconder? I see a hand at the back. Your name, please? Thank you very much. There's a clear majority of more than 2/3 in favor of the proposed bylaw amendment. Thank you. That resolution is then passed. So we've now amended the corporation's bylaws. We're now proceeding to the director's nominations. So as I noted earlier, there is a complete vacancy in all the director positions right now. The number of directors can be between 7 and 11, and FSRA as administrator is exercised discretion to fix the number at 9 directors acting in our role as administrator. This, of course, can be changed once a board is put in place. The resolution approved by the CEO of FSRA as administrator, we stated in that resolution that we, FSRA, as an administrator, can nominate candidates for election as directors. Also in accordance with that resolution, we made provision that 3 members may nominate another qualified person for election as a director. Those nominations, must be in writing and signed by the nominating members and have the nominee's consent to act as a director if elected. We'll also require a summary of that person's career and credit union involvement. You've seen the competency and skills matrix. Those will be the factors that we'll be interested in. These nominations, if there are any, must be received at the meeting tonight. Now, as I mentioned before, if there are additional nominations, I will adjourn the meeting so that we, in conjunction with Odgers, can conduct due diligence and determine whether we're prepared to change the list of recommended nominees for the directors of PACE Credit Union. If we determine that it's not appropriate for additional nominees, we'll return next Monday with the same slate. If some of those nominees we consider do meet the criteria which we've outlined for directorship, we will revise the slate and present it again next Monday for a vote. In either case, it will of course be your right as members to vote for or against that slate and to decide whether we begin on the path back to member-controlled governance. If there are no additional nominations tonight, we will then have a discussion of whether we'll put the recommended slate of nominees, the 9 that Michael has taken us through, to vote tonight, or whether you would like to have an adjournment to next Monday to further consider this. So let's deal with the first matter first. Are there any additional nominations from the floor that you would like FSRA to consider in its role as administrator with the assistance of Odgers as to whether we should revise our proposed slate of directors? So I will pause for a moment so that people can consider that, and then we would require the written nomination, the consent of the nominee, and 3 members, and then we can follow up to do the due diligence on the person's credentials. Thank you. As I've not received any other nominations, we'll now proceed to discuss whether we'll vote tonight on the proposed slate of directors. Well, it's our preference to proceed with the vote tonight. In a way, that's much easier for me to say because I've gotten quite comfortable with the background of these individuals. I've had a chance to participate, not on the selection panel, but I've monitored the whole process. I know the competency matrix. I know how Odgers has done careful work to try and find the best candidates possible. I know the selection panel well and how seriously they took their duties, how much time and attention they spent on that. It was a very careful search process, and so I can wholly recommend to you the slate of nominees we have. But I also realized that we only were able to finalize that information and get it out to you today. And it is an important decision for the people in the room. So if more time is required, we can adjourn the meeting tonight, and we can have another meeting next Monday to consider the proposed slate of directors from FSRA that you see before you. So what I would ask for now is, again, yes cards if you'd like to proceed with the vote tonight, no cards if you would like to adjourn the meeting for 1 week, and then we will return next Monday to vote on the FSRA proposed slate of directors. If you could please show us your cards. Thank you. Vlad, I think that's a clear vote to proceed this evening. So the proposal by FSRA as administrator is that these 9 nominees, with George Cook as chair, would be elected as the PACE Credit Union Board of Directors to take effective office at the point where FSRA releases PACE from administration. It'll give us a body of people to work with so we can work out the terms of exiting administration. Yes, please.
Hi, just a question. It's my understanding that once PACE entered administration, it costs PACE X number of dollars to be under administration. So in order for us to make an informed decision about not approving the slate, if it's anticipated that it's not passed today as is, then what would be the cost to the membership to continue to be under administration?
Rubina, do you have an estimate of what the costs are of administration, let's say, over the last 12 months?
I think in the last 12 months, it's about 3.7, or between 4 and 5 million or so, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to.
It is an expensive process. I will actually say that there's another cost which is hidden. Regulators are not meant to operate businesses. And it's not a healthy thing for regulators to be operating businesses. We should be regulating the businesses. So Rubina was very kind in her slides, but you saw that there are basically, the book is being de-risked, which is of course what a regulator would like to do, but there is also the possibility that business is not being done to its fullest. So I am a firm believer that you need a division between church and state. You should have the entity being run by management under the guidance of a board of directors, and you should have the regulator regulating that business. And it is not a long-term viable solution. Matter of fact, businesses can dwindle when regulators are too involved. And that's not a direct cost, but that's an indirect cost.
So if I can just say on that point that you've made, that members are to choose our board of directors. And while I think the slate is very impressive, I do feel that I've lost my right to vote, and I don't want to continue to go through a lengthy process to see our credit union continue to rise from the events over the last years. Is it possible that we could look to having, instead of having them for 3 years with this first vote, to look at maybe either doing a staggered term or doing a 1 year and doing an election earlier than having this slate, if they are successful in coming in for 3 years, to have it 1 year or something shorter?
So I understand your concern. I will share again with you that FSRA actually is legally entitled, and the Act actually kind of thinks that we're just going to make up our decision and give you a board of directors. I don't believe that's the right thing to do, and that's why I'm here consulting with you tonight. I understand your view that this is not the regular process that you would elect directors by. You don't get to vote for them individually. They aren't basically people who have all been in the PACE organization for a long period of time. I understand that that is causing some consternation of the people in the room. This is not a usual process. This is a very bad process that we have got PACE Credit Union into the situation where its board had to be removed. My goal here is to give you a path back to a normal membership. I am firmly of the view that a 1-year term is not acceptable. I will not release PACE from administration with directors who are there for 1 year. I need to know, because this is more than a 1-year problem, it will take longer than that. And so for me to discharge my role as administrator, 1 year is not going to be sufficient. You know, I think you're going to find this board of directors is listening and very responsive. And if they're not, so you may have to put up with them for a few years, and then you can throw them out if you don't think they're doing a good job. But that is a good path, because I'm balancing here the need to make sure that your organization, your deposits, your community bank essentially is safe and sound for you. And the best way I can do that is to make sure that you have what I think are the best 9 people to do that, and you have them committed to do that for a sufficient period of time to get PACE out of the woods, to get you out of supervision, to get you even off a watch list, back to normal operations where it's growing, where it's adding to the services that it's providing to its members, not subtracting. May I have the card saying yes for those in favor of the proposed 9 nominees that are on the screen for the PACE Board of Directors? Could you raise your cards as yes? And leaving those cards up, could I see the no cards for those opposed? Thank you very much. The motion is carried. So with that, I'd like to declare George Cook as the chair, along with the other 8 nominees. You now have a PACE Board of Directors. FSRA is committed to working with them closely, along with the PACE management, to develop a plan to complete this transition so that we will get PACE out of administration and then ultimately out of supervision. I'd like to thank everybody for their time tonight. I realize that this has been really quite a complicated matter. I know there's a lot of complicated legal and financial issues. By the quality of your questions and the discussion, I can see that you actually care deeply about this organization and you are following the proceedings closely. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I'd like to thank Vlad, Michael, Amanda, Rubina, and frankly everybody who came here tonight.